The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get Stinko.
From the Cumulus Studios in lovely Minneapolis, Minnesota, this is the Giles and the Goalie podcast. I am one of your hosts, Giles Farrell. Across the studio from me, as always, is Ben Remington.
Hello.
Ben, did you stay warm this week?
Oh, God. Warm enough? But, yeah, not that warm.
It was so cold this week. My power steering sensor kept tripping, so the power steering on my car would go out, so I'd have to restart the car every time it did that, but
man,
it made turning impossible.
Yeah, when you lose power steering, and hopefully that hasn't happened to too many people, but the few people that it's happened to, you know how much fun that can be and how much of an upper body workout it is, too.
Yes, trying to turn the steering wheel, putting next to nothing in it previously, and then having to put everything you have into turning the car. Is quite wonderful.
Yeah, you don't know how awesome power steering is until you lose it.
You could say that for a lot of things. Like beating up on the Avalanche.
Yeah, you really take advantage of things, and then when they're gone, it's like, oh, crap.
When it's really taken away from you,
I like
you
that.
really cherish it.
Now it's gone.
Hey, speaking of that, the Minnesota Wild played hockey games this week, and as I said on our game preview on the YouTube channel before the Florida Panthers game, I noted that this was a big week for the Wild, and I think I even noted this on the last podcast.
Yeah.
That this was where they needed to start making the jump in the standings. They needed to win all the games this week. They have 3 winnable games, with the biggest one being Colorado at the end of the week. And well, I almost sort of got what I was looking for. But to recap, the Minnesota Wild hosted the Florida Panthers at XL Energy Center on Tuesday night and convincingly won 5-1 over the Florida Panthers as Matt Cullen tallied a pair of goals. Mm-hmm. And Eric Stahl tallied a pair of goals. Mm-hmm. This is a recurring theme this week. And then Charlie Coyle ruined Eric Stahl's chance at an empty netter for the hat trick to get him off the goal-scoring drought that he was on. But Wild win 5-1. Very, very dominating performance from the Wild. Something that, as I said last week, we really needed to see from them moving forward. James Reimer got chased for Harry Sateri in the hockey game.
All-time great hockey
and
game.
as I tweeted out, reminds me of the 90s SNL actor Sherry O'Terry.
Yeah. No, that's it. Yeah.
It sounds similar.
Yeah.
There's your 90s SNL reference for this episode. Then moving forward into Thursday, the Wild hosted the Buffalo Sabres in what we all hope to be their annual turn the season around game against Buffalo. And again, very convincingly, the Wild win 6-2 as in his return from injury, Nino Niederreiter scored a whopping 69 seconds into the hockey game.
Nice.
And he went on to score a hat trick just 24 minutes into the hockey game. He had a hat trick. His parents were in the stands.
Yeah,
nice moment. Was hoping for more, but he did not get that. Goals from Winnick, who had a very nice snipe,
Yeah, beautiful.
and Mikko Koivu and Charlie Coyle helped the Wild win 6-2. Devin Dubnyk, not mentioned, but looking very sharp on both nights here for the Wild. Nothing more really than you can say. They took care of business. They dominated. They did what they needed to do in these 2 home games, which going into Saturday night's game against Colorado was what you wanted from them, almost to a T.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I was at the Panthers game and in the Farrell luxury box, of course, and
Stocked full of alcohol, no doubt.
it's right by the bar, that's for sure. But the Panthers had actually been playing well. They were on a 5-game winning streak going into St. Paul that night, and they just looked like they had no answer for the Wild. Similar to another situation that we saw later in the week, but in reverse. But they had nothing. It was a complete no-show by the Panthers, and credit to the Wild is because the Wild were playing well. I mean, it was a little sloppy at first, which when isn't it? But yeah, it was absolutely dominant. And then obviously the Buffalo game looks like every time the Wild play Buffalo, it seems like, and yeah, exactly what you would expect. And optimism reigned. There was a lot of optimism. There should have been. The team was finally 100% healthy. They were flattening opponents they should flatten. And then we get to Saturday.
Before we dive into Saturday's lovely affair, a few noteworthy things here for the Wild in those 2 home games was Zach Parise returned on Tuesday for the Wild, and he was on a line with Charlie Coyle, Joel Eriksson Ek. He looked, pretty decent actually for somebody who hadn't played all season, jumping back into the lineup mid-year. And then the other thing out of that was Charlie Coyle was moved back to center that line, which, as our friend Brandon Slyke from the Athletic and Hockey Wilderness pointed out, Joel Eriksson Ek not doing good by any means on faceoffs, which probably has more to do with Coyle going back to center, but kind of a noteworthy thing here as Coyle seemingly better suited on the wing, which you can say for many, many other players on this roster, but is this what we want to see, or is this do we want to just keep Joel Eriksson Ek on center and let him figure it out?
I struggle with this every time they move Coyle to the wing or move him to center because I don't like seeing him as a center. But I understand that a lot of the times it necessitates, that's a necessary move. So I don't know. It just I think if you're going to move Eriksson Ek to wing right now, like is that is that his future home? Is kind of my thing. Like, you draft him to be a center. By all indications, he was supposed to be a center. He seems like he has the skill set to be a center. It's not like he's an overly lumbering guy. He's got size, though, and it seems like he has enough. It just seems like he has what it takes to play center. And I don't know, as many advanced stats folks will tell you, faceoffs are important, but I don't know, are they that important that you need to move a guy off of his future position? Like, how's he supposed to learn how to win faceoffs? And it's not like he was at a 25% clip. He wasn't losing faceoffs. I don't even know what his percentage was, but it wasn't horrific to the point where, like he lost every single faceoff he was ever in. It wasn't that bad,
I think it was something along the lines of like 36% or something.
Okay, so it was bad, but it certainly wasn't, he's not.
I'm looking it up.
At 10%, you know what I mean? Like, how is he supposed to become a faceoff guy? Faceoff is very much a skill. It's not necessarily something that comes with, there's certainly guys that have talent for it, but it's not something that I think just comes to you.
35.9% is what Joel Eriksson Ek
that's pretty bad.
At.
That's pretty bad, but I don't know. Faceoffs are important, but I think having a player play his natural position and having him learn. And I get it that, it's a win-now thing with this team for sure, but I don't know. I still am not crazy about the move.
And then as I mentioned on Thursday, Nino Niederreiter returned from his injury, obviously tallying the hat trick. And good to have him back in the lineup, our beloved hockey boy. And we mentioned last week on the show about his ice time in the games leading up to his lower body injury, in air quotes.
Right.
But in the 2 games here he's played since returning from injury, his ice time was 12:03 against Buffalo, which, everyone was seemingly got a good average out of ice time as the Wild were just stomping on the Sabres.
Yeah, it's easy to roll 4 lines when you're up 4 goals.
And then in Colorado, he played 16:38. So you hope that he's getting closer to the 16:38 we saw in Colorado, although you hope that the result is maybe a little different. And with that said, the Minnesota Wild, in a very crucial game in Pepsi Center, the Can, with Colorado looking to get even in the standings with the Minnesota Wild in points. I cannot believe that's being said. The Minnesota Wild drop a deuce in this hockey game and lose 7-2 to the Avalanche as just about everyone scores for Colorado, and the Wild just offered nothing. And as I threw it out on Twitter during the game, very underwhelming performance from the Wild in a game that they needed to win. Like, you don't want to label a game in January a must-win, but I really felt like this was a must-win game for the Wild if they really were going to take off.
Right.
And I'm now left asking more questions than I am with answers.
Right.
Colorado, a lot of emotion for them. Milan Hajduk getting his number retired. Last game for them before their bye week. And they were an incredibly fast hockey team and really firing on all cylinders coming into this game. But you can't lay a deuce like that against probably your biggest rival.
Yeah.
As you're trying to keep them away from you in the standings. That is unacceptable from a hockey team where the motto going into the season was good is not good enough. Because right now, good would be quite satisfactory from what we see sometimes from the Minnesota Wild.
It would be a pleasant change. This Avalanche game, I mean, a lot of people talked about it being a burn the tape game. And Russo tweeted, he said, no, they need to learn from this. And I think he's right. And, we'll see what happens going forward, but I have a shred of optimism, and here's why. The Wild have lost 7-2 already this season before, if you recall. It was probably the best Facebook Live recap you ever did.
Against the Jets.
Yes.
Kyle Quincy's final game.
Yes. After that game, they won 6 out of 7. So, as much as you hate to say, you hate to use crappy games as a motivator, and as much as you really shouldn't have to, quite frankly, I think this team responds to a slap in the face. Because that Jets game, that was certainly a slap in the face. And hopefully, this Avalanche game is a slap in the face in that, yeah, you're 100% healthy now. We get it. You had 2 good games this week. That's nice, but you still need to put 100% effort out there every night. Being 100% healthy isn't good enough for this team to win hockey games. You still have to put forth the effort. So, it was a rude awakening in a lot of ways, but I that shred of optimism and that hopefully, I didn't think this team needed a kick in the pants, but obviously it did. And maybe this one game is an aberration. I guess we'll find out next week.
How many more kick in the pants do they need? Like, I get it. They've had one already this year, and there's been a couple of close calls too, but here's another one, and how many more times do you need this before you finally go? Like, this team is fully healthy, and before the Colorado game, Devin Dubnyk was playing really well.
Yeah, very.
And at what point do they just go? How many more painful lessons do they need to learn before they go? That's where I'm really at right now with the Wild.
And that's understandable, and I think that's fair. And, professional athletes shouldn't need a wake-up call once every 2 months. But human motivation is a weird thing. Human motivation is kind of a fickle beast. I don't know. I'm not super surprised that sometimes people who are even professionals and good at their job, need a little extra motivation and need to kind of get set straight. And I don't know exactly what the issue was with the Wild in Denver last night, but if somehow, some way that can set them straight for, because they went on a pretty good stretch after that Jets game. It was 6 of 7, and then, I think they dropped a couple, and then I think they went on another little winning streak, and so I don't know. I'm hoping that is the case more so than, like this is what this team is.
As we record here on Sunday, the Minnesota Wild are tied with two other teams with 47 points for the final wild card spot in the Western Conference. Via the tiebreaker scenarios, the Minnesota Wild would be on the outside looking in with those 47 points, as the Colorado Avalanche would be the holder of the final wild card spot as we record. Again, I cannot believe I'm saying this. But looking ahead, the Wild have another, I'm not going to say another relatively easy week ahead, but they have a week ahead as
they have a week.
Yeah, they return home to host the Calgary Flames on Tuesday night. The Yagerless Calgary Flames.
Did they make that official today?
I haven't seen that yet, but
okay.
I heard that was coming very close to an end.
Yeah, me too.
The Yager.
I just didn't know if they had dotted the I's and crossed the T's.
And as you pointed out, weird how that happens a month before the
yeah.
Olympics.
Where is he going to sign? It rhymes with Schmolympics. So, yeah.
And then immediately after, the Wild get to travel to the lovely United Center for a game Wednesday night against the Chicago Blackhawks.
You know what's funny? I'm going to be in Chicago.
Are you going?
I haven't quite decided yet. I'm going to be there with a couple other Minnesotans, but they're not big Wild fans. I might have to talk them into it.
You might find some cheap tickets because the Chicago Blackhawks are the last place team in the Central Division.
Yeah, I probably should look at StubHub, but I looked at just the Chicago website. They had the Blackhawks website. And they had nothing but standing room only. I should say nothing under $200 a seat that wasn't standing room only.
Yeah. Don't stand at the United Center. And then finishing out the week, the Wild play the Winnipeg Jets Saturday night, 6 p.m. at XL Energy Center. A very, very tough week ahead here, as the Wild play very well at home. So you'd like to think that they could take care of business in the home games, but the road play is what really comes into light here.
Right.
And we saw that very well against the Avalanche on Saturday night. But, you just got to hope that the Wild somehow can take, 2 out of 3 games this week. Say that probably every week, but probably more so this week, as they really need to get rid of that bad taste in their mouth from the Avalanche game. But
right.
You're playing the Jets, top team in the Central Division. The Flames right there with the Wild battling for that last wild card spot.
Yep. Huge games.
And then you got the Blackhawks, who are just trying to fight and claw to stay alive right now in the playoff picture. And I know they're only 3 points behind, but you start to move any further away at this point in the year, and those points are hard to recover from.
They're a cornered animal right now, for sure.
Say the Wild are still 3 points up on Chicago heading into their game Wednesday night. You're going to play a Blackhawks team that is probably going to be borderline on desperation to win a hockey game, which is absolutely frightening.
Yeah, no kidding.
So I can't stress enough how crucial again this week is for the Wild. They got to find a way to take care of business. And as I said, the home and road splits are quite something to behold here, as the Wild are holders of a 14-4-2 home record, which I believe they have won 7 in a row and 7 out of their last 8 or something like that. And then you flip to the road record, and they are an abysmal 8-13-1.
Oof.
So not only are they just losing on the road, they're not even getting points on the road.
Yeah.
More times than none, they're just coming away with 0 points, which in this day and age, you got to come up with something. That is the ever so crucial week ahead here for the Minnesota Wild. There is a game next Sunday against the Vancouver Canucks. Noteworthy here, the time change in the hockey game was originally slated for 6 p.m., so I know all 6 of you who listen to this podcast will, if you have tickets, you might see it say 6 p.m., but it is now 7 p.m.
Yeah.
because the Wild were accommodating to their friends from Minneapolis, the Minnesota Vikings, who are hosting a playoff game next Sunday at 3:30. So the Wild trying to not cross up with the Vikings game kind of smartly. So
Yeah.
either it'll be euphoria inside XL Energy Center or the alcohol sales will be through the roof.
It'll be a funeral home. Yeah, there can be one of two options.
We'll either get many skull chants or no skull chants.
Well,
do you like the skull chants that have taken place inside the X?
People know the answer to this already.
We have to give the people what they want on this podcast.
So it's become like almost a bit level for me how much I hate fan behavior, and you know, I got Joe Booley kind of called me out for being a grumpy Gus about this whole skull chant thing, and my response was keep your choky concussion ball chant at the choky concussion ball arena.
Keep it inside the $1 billion
right
Ziggy
and so
Palace.
And not that like, oh, you know, Wild fans can't be Vikings fans. I'm not that big of a jerk. Really hard to stay PG.
Stick
PG
to
there.
hockey.
Really hard to stay PG there. But yeah, I don't know. It's always weird to me when you do other teams' chants at an arena. Like, is there ever gonna be a "Let's Go Wild" chant during a Vikings game?
No.
You know, even
No.
if they're in the Stanley Cup playoffs, like, not that the times coincide, but you know, I don't know. Is there ever going to be a "Let's Go Twins" chant if they're in the World Series during Wild season? No, there's not. Like, it's my annoyance with the Vikings and how much people love the Vikings and how much people fall for the Vikings bid every season around here.
Oof. It's going to be quite something when they crush us in a whole new way. But no, to me, it just kind of falls along the lines of I frown upon wearing Vikings jersey to a Wild game.
Right.
So I kind of view it in the same thing. It's like, I don't go to a Wild game to chant skull.
Right.
Like, I get it. Like, everyone's excited about the Vikings. Good.
Yeah.
Great. Chant skull in your car, outside the arena. Just, why do you bring it in? Like, the Wild are not the Vikings. Like, just don't.
It's basically telling the Wild, and not that, you know, they give a crap, but, you know, the purpose of fan cheering and stuff like that is to support your team.
Right.
So what you're telling the Wild in this moment is that, yes, we're at your sporting event, but we care more about the football team right now than you. And that's the part that, like, the wave and, you know, bringing in other chants and you know, there's a shred of disrespect to the team on the ice.
Never thought I'd see the day when I just yearn for the old classic wave.
But it's just like, you're there to watch a hockey game, watch a hockey game. You know, do your dumb hockey chants and you know, whatever. But, I mean, if you're chanting for the Vikings at a Wild game, you're telling the Wild we don't give a crap about what's going on right now on the ice.
All right. Before we just sit here and pine about skull chants all day long, we better get after it here.
Yeah.
And we have a special guest joining us here, so we will get to that.
All right.
Joining us on the podcast today is Dan Myers, who does pretty much all the Wild digital content work. Dan, thanks for joining us today. How's it going?
Not too bad, guys. Thanks for having me on.
So first question, Dan, before we dive into the Minnesota Wild here for you, is Ben and I are big Jersey fans, critics, and whatnot. And so something I got to ask you right off the hop here is, why don't the Miami Dolphins wear those lovely throwbacks every home game?
I ask myself the same question every time they roll that beautiful 1970s era aqua home uniform out. They wear it like once or twice a year, and seriously, it's the best uniform they have. And even I think on Thanksgiving Day, maybe 8-9 years ago, they wore a white version of the same jersey, and it was gorgeous. So I'm with you guys. Like, they need to bring that back full time, and if they did, I would buy 5 jerseys the day they did.
When they do that, they also go all out on the field with the end zones and the midfield logo too, and it just has the total 70s look. So I am very on board with that happening full time.
Well, and they usually play pretty well in those uniforms up until last Sunday when they got beat pretty good by the Bills Mafia. But I mean, before that, they played their best game of the season when they beat New England a couple weeks before that. And usually they play well. They didn't. I'm willing to forgive it for 1 week because I think they'd pretty much given up on the season last Sunday. But bring those jerseys back. Show me where to co-sign on that, and I will do it. Believe me.
So speaking of playing well, the Minnesota Wild, the team we all look at intensely here, had quite the game last night, Saturday against Colorado. Really, you kind of said it best, as it's probably one you want to throw away into the trash can pretty quick here.
Yeah, it was apparent right from the opening puck drop last night that Colorado came out with a lot of juice. I mean, that was, I think I tweeted it out before the game, the crowd I saw, and I'd only been to a couple preseason games at Pepsi Center, so I get it. But the crowd I saw during warm-ups last night was probably double any crowd I had ever seen in that building before. With the Milan Hajduk pregame ceremony, Colorado playing really well right now. They got a full house last night. That building was electric. That was a lot of fun. And Colorado really made it look good for the home fans right from the opening start. They were fast. They were physical. They were nothing like the team last season that had 48 points in 82 games. They're already at 47 points halfway through the season this year. I think they've tied their win total already from all of last year. So this is a much different team, and it was apparent right away last night that they just were going to be the better team that night, and they were.
So you mentioned that Colorado being at the halfway mark, the Wild hit the halfway mark on Thursday against Buffalo. How do you feel on the Wild as the halfway mark on their season so far? You know, we've had a lot of ups and downs, but they seemingly were getting onto a better track this week before the game against Colorado. But how are you feeling on them so far this year?
Well, I think if it's, trying to grade these guys right now, I think you have to give it an incomplete. I mean, you look at they've been without Jared Spurgeon for 9 games. They've been without Nino Niederreiter for 11 games. They've been without Charlie Coyle for 15 or 16 games. I mean, they've been without Zach Parise for all but a couple games. So, I mean, I know it's kind of excuse computerish to say that, but when these aren't bottom 6 guys and bottom pairing defensemen that they've been without for large chunks of the season. These guys are actually legit players with this team. That doesn't even count Mikael Granlund, who missed a chunk of games at the beginning of the season. So I think for the amount of injuries they've sustained and weathered, the fact that they're still right on the fringe of the playoff mix, tied with Colorado for that line. I think Anaheim for the last wild card spot right now is a good sign. There are certainly some things and some weaknesses that need to be ironed out. This team's struggling on the road right now, and they cannot continue to play that way. And Bruce Boudreau said at postgame last night, they can't continue to play this way on the road if they hope to make the playoffs. I mean, you can win 11 of 13 at home all you want, but if you're going to go through stretches on the road where you're losing 5, 6 games in a row, it's not going to work. So, I mean, I'll say I'm intrigued by what I've seen in a couple games here with the full lineup. I know last night was an ugly one, but you look at that game against Buffalo, and they look pretty good. You look at the game against Florida where they had everyone minus Niederreiter, and they look pretty good. So we'll see. This is a critical stretch. They got a bunch of games here at home. They got games against teams that are real close to them in the standings, with Calgary and Chicago and Vancouver even, I think, next Sunday. So critical stretch here. They've got to figure out the road woes, though. I think that's going to be the most important thing for this team as you look towards the second half.
Yeah, you mentioned the you liked what you saw from the first couple of games here this past week, and especially with a full lineup. That was exactly my thought here, as I kind of mentioned earlier, as the lineup went back to full strength, and really the Wild came out and they took care of business. They did what they needed to do, and I try to look at it from a glass half full kind of a thing, and hope that is more of what we'll see here in the coming weeks and months here to going forward from the Wild, rather than what we saw on Saturday night against Colorado.
Well, and I think, more often than not, you look at what the way this team is constructed when it's at full strength. And you've got a guy like, I think Zach Parise, we saw last night late in the game, moved up to that top group with Zucker and Stahl. And then you've got Niederreiter on that second line with Koivu and Granlund. It pushes guys like Tyler Ennis down the lineup. If Tyler Ennis is playing the way he had been playing the past few games, playing so well with Eric Stahl, if he's able to kind of carry that over and now into a third-line role, and you've got Charlie Coyle down in the third-line role, it just makes this team so much better to play against. It's not, so much harder to play against. And it's, Charlie Coyle and Tyler Ennis, if they're going against third and fourth line, should be able to produce. And that's going to make this team a lot better. And nothing against Zach Mitchell, but he is what he is. A guy like that is a very good fourth line player. That's kind of what I think he's going to be. And it's not to try and tap his career when he's still, trying to get to his prime and trying to get to the NHL, but he is what he is at this point in his career. And you get all these guys healthy, it makes this team a four-line threat. That's what made this team so good for so much of last season. And to see how they kind of put it together on Tuesday and Thursday against Florida and Buffalo really got exciting, and it'll be interesting to see how they respond now to what happened in Colorado on Saturday, coming up back-to-back games here against Calgary, Tuesday, Chicago on Wednesday. Two very important games.
So another kind of thing we're at here at the halfway mark is this upcoming week we're going to get the announcement of the All-Star Game rosters, and obviously I know that the Central Division is always very stacked at forward, but Eric Stahl has to be making a very solid case to make his way in there. What do you think on that?
Well, I think if you're going to pick someone from the Wild and you take the roster considerations out of it, if you just put the guys' resumes on the table and say, all right, here are the guys, who should we take? Eric Stahl is the guy that, I'm with you, is clearly the front runner. 19 goals, 37 points in 42 games. He's a +6. He's played in all 42 games, which you can't say for all that many people in that forward group, especially in that top six group. I think Stahl, Zucker, and Koivu might be the only, the kind of top group guys you think of that have played all 42 games. And you could I think you could have made a case for Zucker up until maybe 3 weeks ago. But Eric Stahl has been the Wild's most consistent player all season long. He's been their best player all season long. And so if you're looking just purely at who deserves to go, I think that would be the guy. Now, there's some injuries out there right now in the Central Division. Guys like Jaden Schwartz, Philip Forsberg. There's a bunch of injuries that are kind of haunting teams in this division. I think I just wrote about this last week on Wild.com in the Central Intelligence. That could actually help Eric Stahl get in. I know that the forward group in the Central is very tough to crack. But I hope they are able to find a way to get Eric Stahl in. One, because it'd be a great story to see him back in the All-Star game. And two, because he is the most deserving guy on this team.
Yeah, it shows him, he's 11th in the Central Division right now in points. So maybe a little bit of an uphill battle, but the guy just ahead of him, Mark Scheifele, he's injured right now.
Yep.
And, maybe if do they still adhere to one player per team?
Yeah, I believe so.
So,
yep.
Like you said, if anyone's going to go from the Wild, it's going to be him.
Well, and he has a little bit of name cachet too, which hopefully will help his cause. But you guys are right. I mean, he certainly has been the best player and deserves to be the one to go. I hope they find a way to make it happen. It'd really be a fun story to follow and chronicle here over the next couple of weeks.
Sure.
Yeah, considering when he signed with the Wild in the summer of 2016, not many really thought he had much left in the tank, and he's gone just about the exact opposite way here, showing he has plenty left, and that would certainly be quite the cap off for that run here.
Well, when you think about, how long he's been in the NHL, you think of him as being, like this 37, 38-year-old guy. He's only 33. Like, I mean, I know that's probably on the back half of a guy's prime, but you're right. He's shown that despite playing more than 1,000 games in this league, I mean, he's still got plenty left in the tank. And the fact that he makes like $3.5 million. I mean, that's quite the steal for this team right now. And I know that there's been some heat on some guys in terms of what they make and whatnot. Eric Staal is a bargain at what he makes. He'd be a steal at twice the price almost, I'd say, at this point.
Yeah, I think every week here on the podcast now, I just sit here and go, man, Eric Staal is really good, and especially considering what he's making on the cap. So that is quite the bargain the Wild are getting from him here.
Right.
Another kind of a newsworthy thing we had this last week, and you kind of wrote about it on Wild.com, was Chuck Fletcher finally got a meeting with one of his top prospects, Kirill Kaprizov. Is that kind of a sign of optimism here moving forward? I know Kaprizov had some questionable remarks about the Wild organization previously, but that's got to be seen as a good thing that he finally got a meeting with Chuck Fletcher.
Yeah, and, it was, credit to the agent and the Wild's Russian news scout, setting that up and making that happen. And talking to Chuck, he had never actually sat with and chatted with Kirill or Andrei Svetlikov, the other player they drafted this year, who's a good friend. I think they're teammates. And it was important for Chuck to be able to get that meeting simply because I think there had been a little miscommunication, to say the least, between their side and what the Wild was thinking. We've seen that play out in the media here, and you look at just the politics of everything and how it's all run over in Russia with, even going as high as Vladimir Putin in trying to keep these guys around as long as possible and signing these guys to contracts and the sharing of information that's not exactly true or maybe not fully true. So it was important for Chuck to get over there, see him firsthand, be able to make a presentation. The big thing he wanted to do, in addition to sharing kind of what the Wild's vision for them was down the road, he understands that this isn't going to be something that's going to change really anytime soon. It's not going to change this summer or even next summer. This is something he's planning for a couple years down the line but he also wanted to go there and just kind of see their personalities. Again, he's watched them play plenty of times, but he never had a chance to meet him and talk to him and sit down. So he had a chance to just kind of be in a room, kind of get a feel for what those guys are like, kind of their views on life, their vision on life, how they view family and stuff like that. And he told me he came away very impressed.
That's great news. That's certainly a 180 from the news that we heard, probably about a month ago. And then obviously the news at the beginning of the season when he got the contract extension there with CSKA. So certainly something, the Wild don't have a lot of super top flight prospects. They've called up a lot of them in recent years, including like Luke Cunnin. But to kind of hopefully be able to salvage, a guy who can really be a game changer would be huge for this team.
Yeah, and don't shortchange Svetlikov either. And Chuck was sure to tell me that as well. He was a guy that the Wild drafted. I believe they drafted him in the 6th round this year at the draft in Chicago. And he was an older kid, and he had just re-signed a contract with his team there in the KHL. And he thought that was really one of the reasons why he was available in the 6th round. He's a guy that probably would have been taken a lot earlier if he was a year or two younger, if his contract situation was maybe a little bit more team-friendly. When I say team-friendly, I mean NHL team-friendly. A talented guy. And he's another kid that when he comes over, 3 years down the line, whenever that is going to be a mature 23-year-old professional who's played hockey for several years at a very high level. So he had a chance to come over and be polished and maybe be a guy that helps this team right away down the line, just like they hoped Kirill Kaprizov. I was corrected. It is indeed Kaprizov. Chuck Fletcher told me that. That was one of the other notes he told me. They certainly hope those two, but especially Kaprizov, as you said, will be polished products and ready to go and ready to jump right in and help this team 2-3 years down the line.
Like Capri Sun, got it.
There you go.
Put it in there. Update all the pronunciation charts.
Yeah, it's interesting because they got those two kids, and then they've got Dmitry Sokolov, and so we're looking at potentially in a couple of years here the Wild having they could build an entire Russian line, which for Wild fans is mind-boggling because this team dabbled so infrequently with Russian players, basically before they drafted Kaprizov.
Mm-hmm. It's a scary prospect for any team. I mean, really, just with the way, again, politically how it is over there, how they control their players, how those teams operate. Chuck was telling me that the team CSK that these guys play for has a payroll of over like $100 million in Russia, and they play in a league with teams that have $6 or $7 or $8 million payroll. So, over there, it's the wild, wild west, and these guys, the team these guys play for, they just go out and buy other teams' players.
Yeah.
And so it's not uncommon for Kaprizov to be a healthy scratch one every 4, 5, 6 games, not because he's playing poorly, but because they have so many guys that they're paying $1 million contracts to that they've got to get them into the lineup. So it's a scary prospect. Anytime you're, pun intended there, by the way, it's a scary prospect to draft these guys when you just frankly don't know when you're going to be able to get your hands on them and see them in a uniform, much less be able to talk to them and say hello.
Just a few more questions here for Dan Myers at Wild.com before we let him go. And these are going to be kind of our questions we ask every guest here. The first of which is, because obviously, Dan, you spend a lot of time around the team working for Wild.com now. Is there kind of a fun little behind-the-scenes story that you can share with us? Like we had Chad Graff on, and he talked about him and Russo finding Ilya Brizgalov, reading, I think it was Ukrainian or Russian politics, and started talking about that. Or
at a Pittsburgh bar.
Yeah, Evan Spoor talked about how Ryan Suter took him into the team dining room and fed him after Yom Kippur. Something along those lines.
Oh, man. Let me think here. I'm trying to think of a good podcast-friendly story that won't get me fired. I guess I don't have a single story to go on. I'll say this story, and this involves can I say a story that involves a former player?
Yeah. Sure.
So my very first day on the job, and this, gosh, I hope this doesn't get me fired. I'm going to edit the language out so it won't. My very first day on the job covering for NHL.com. So this is pre-C Suter days. This is the Mike Yo's first year. Wild were the best team in the NHL right around December 15th, and then went completely off a cliff the second half of that year. My first day on the job was a morning skate before the Chicago Blackhawks came to town. And I walked into the locker room all full of confidence, ready to go. And the first thing I did was step right on the logo.
No.
Needless to say, Cal Clutterbuck, God bless him, was not pleased with my infringement on the logo and dropped several F-bombs and then threatened to fine me a couple $100. And it's fresh, hadn't even gotten my first NHL.com paycheck yet, was horrified. So I applauded the move to acquire Nino Niederreiter. I thought that was a great deal for the Wild. And I'm kidding. Cal's a fine guy. It was just a simple misunderstanding. But that was kind of my indoctrination into covering the National Hockey League.
That's quite the start there.
Yeah.
Nothing like Cal Clutterbuck undressing you verbally in the middle of a locker room with, the Chicago Blackhawks in town. So it's not like it's a small media contingent. It was quite the full dressing room that day. But you know what? Lesson learned. I have not stepped on the logo since. I can honestly say that. So I guess I can thank Cal Clutterbuck for that.
The second of the three questions we have here to end for you is, as we mentioned here right off the hop, Ben and I are big jersey guys. So do you have a particular favorite hockey jersey of all time, or if you're like us, you can't really narrow it down to one? Do you have like a Mount Rushmore of hockey jerseys?
I'd say I have a Mount Rushmore of hockey jerseys that I think, it's so hard to pick one. If you narrow it down to just, what I think about the Wild's current jerseys now, I think their white jerseys are arguably the best in the league. I've thought that for a couple years now. They did a fantastic job with those whites. The greens this year were a giant step up. I think the green home jerseys are fantastic. I love that they have the crest on the front now.
Yeah.
I think that's so cool. The logo is still so great. 20 years after it was released here, it's still one of the best logos in the league. Branching out from that, the 70s era North Stars jerseys are fantastic. Before they included the black, when it was just kind of the green, the gold, and the white.
Yep.
So good. The Blackhawks Reds are a timeless classic. Fantastic jerseys. Let me think here around the league. I love the Kings purple and gold jerseys. I think those are super cool. The classic Kings throwbacks to like the 80s, 70s, and 80s.
The forum blue.
Yep. And even if you want to dip into like the college ranks, I thought North Dakota's jerseys when they were the Fighting Sioux were great. Those Kelly Green road jerseys were fantastic. Alaska Anchorage usually has some really good jerseys, and of course my Minnesota State Mavericks have they wore a 1980 throwback jersey a few years back. It was gold, and it had the purple bowl that outlined the Mavericks. It's a great logo.
Yeah.
I've petitioned Mike Hastings for a couple years now to make it their permanent shoulder patch, and I haven't gotten anywhere with it, but I'm going to continue that fight. So
I remember that one. That was a good one.
It's impossible to pick just one. There's so many good ones out there, either currently or in the past. It's impossible to pick just one, I think.
Yeah. No, we definitely agree on that there's no easy way to just pick out one. So it's so we kind of try to roll with a Mount Rushmore here.
Even that's hard.
Yeah.
Or like a couple Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, just a top 10. That's
like
not always easy. Yeah,
right.
we
That might
fumble
be
with
something good for the bye week to put together.
Yeah.
Dan's top 10 jersey countdown. Maybe you'll see that on wild.com if anyone cares about that.
We certainly have dabbled in that, being bloggers and getting away with basically whatever we want to throw on the internet. We've both done an article like that. So there's plenty of inspiration out there for you.
I'll have to check that out.
And then last question for Dan before we let you go here is, this is a little bit off the board, this question on a hockey podcast, but we get a lot of reaction out of it from certainly ourselves and everyone we have on.
Right.
So do you believe soup to be a meal, or is it just a side to something?
That's a great question. I've had this debate so many times with Kevin Gorg.
Wow. That's interesting.
Who he believes soup is a meal. And I'd be lying if I said I haven't had soup as a meal, but I do indeed view it as more of I've become to view it as more of a pre-meal appetizer.
Sure.
I used to think before I got into the days of eating fancy dinners with Kevin Gorg and Anthony LaPanta that, hey, there's nothing wrong with going into a place and ordering a soup and a salad as your dinner. Well, Kevin Gorg has kind of indoctrinated me now into eating soups before the meals. So he always says soup is a meal, and I've seen him eat it as a meal, but he loves his soup before a nice steak or something like that. And now all of a sudden he's gotten me into it. So I'm going to say soup is an appetizer.
Yes.
It's not a meal.
Swish.
All right. Well, that is that falls with Ben on this side of the argument.
Yes.
Well, you'd be surprised how often we have that debate, too. It's an ongoing debate, and one that I'm sure is changing the landscape of American dialogue.
It really has consumed the state of hockey, yes.
It's an important debate.
Yeah.
It also, I think, it might depend on what kind of soup you're having. If you're having like a bisque or something a little thicker, maybe that's more of the meal type. Whereas if you're having a chowder or I guess that's kind of thick too. But if you're having a chicken noodle that's something a little thinner, or the Minnesota Classic, the chicken wild rice, which is fantastic. We get that about once a month for our media meal at the X, and it's the best thing they do. I wish they'd just do it every single game and kind of make it the Minnesota thing.
Right.
It's so good. I'm going to have to call my wife now. She's at the grocery store, and I'm going to have to make a batch chicken wild rice soup this week. So if we got nothing else out of this conversation, I got a good dinner this week. So thanks, guys.
Great.
There you go.
That's all we can hope for on this show.
Dan, before we let you go, is there anything you'd like to plug, or where can people find you?
Well, you can find me, obviously, on wild.com. I do a lot of the written content there. So I hope folks are stopping by even after tough nights like Saturday night. We got the traditional post-game hat trick. We got a Jewel Erickson X feature going up at some point today here on Sunday, if you're listening to us on Sunday. If you're listening to us after Sunday, it'll still be up on the site here for about a week or so. A whole bunch of game coverage we got coming this week. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Myers, DANMYERS. We finally got rid of the pesky numeral on the front of it, thanks to Zach Halverson, which is a completely different story. Those are the two main channels you can find me at. I'm always up for talking hockey, whether it's wild hockey, NHL hockey, or college hockey. I'm a big Mavericks fan, too, so all the Maverick fans out there, get after me. Let's go.
Noted Maverick Dan Myers. Thank you so much for jumping on with us today, and hopefully we'll have you on down the road here.
Anytime, guys. Thanks for the conversation.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks. Thanks to Dan for joining us once again. And with that said, on to our Bruce Boudreau quote of the week.
Hi, this is Bruce Boudreau. I don't see how in Toronto that they're calling it, unless it's a guy they just pulled in off the street that hasn't seen hockey before. If I were the fans, I'd be booing even more, because that, they pay good money for this.
If you want it, don't just think you want it. Go out and f***ing want it.
So we got our Bruce Boudreau quote of the week on Monday of this week. As we mentioned last week, the funny situation with the coach getting hit in the head with a puck, and didn't exactly have a great one-liner from him, but the rest of the team seemed to offer up some one-liners on it. So we go back to that again this week when Mr. Boudreau himself offered up the line on if he had any resolutions this year. And he said, one is to duck the next time a puck comes at me. So, well said, Coach. And the bandage on his head, I noticed in Saturday night's game, got a little bit smaller.
Yeah.
Finally went down from bandage that takes up half his head to a little tiny bandage that can barely notice. So,
right.
Good to see. Always good for a fun one-liner from him. But no one-liners from him after Colorado's game. He painted quite the picture.
Yeah, he did say that if they didn't have a required day off today, they would be practicing today. Which, kind of gives you an idea as to, he's talking about obviously it's a CBA thing where they couldn't practice today. But obviously not, he was not happy, so but that's all you really got out of him.
Man, these CBA mandatory days off always fall on the worst
They really
day.
do. They really do.
Every time. It's just like clockwork, and I bet you Boudreaux would say something very similar to that effect.
Right.
Yeah, that is your Bruce Boudreaux quote of the week. Now on to our weekly wager.
What's your bet, sir?
Ah, yes, the bet.
Okay, what the hell? It makes very little sense to bet when you cannot win.
Weekly wager for this week. We're back, and I haven't tallied up the score yet. I keep forgetting. Somebody at me during the week and remind me to do this because I just keep forgetting. But I think for this week, a good thing to wager on is the Wild game in Chicago.
Okay. Are you optimistic? I'm assuming you're pessimistic.
Well, yeah. But I'm gonna go the other way on this one, and I say the Wild finally right the ship. At least they finally get a road effort worth something. And they sneak out of the United Center with 2 points. It might not be the prettiest 2 points, but they sneak out of there with 2 points, a win, and they push the Blackhawks even further down the standings, much to the delight of just about everyone. I will give you the loss on this one.
I'm actually fine with that. If you know what, I'm gonna say it's an overtime loss. I'll take the loss either way, but I think that they can take care of business against Calgary. I'm a little optimistic about that game against Winnipeg just because it's at home. But I think if they're going to lose a game this week, it is going to be that game in Chicago, just because they're so bad on the road right now. And Chicago, like I said, they're a cornered animal. I mean, they're really... You've got a team with that much talent, with their backs against the wall. There's a lot of motivation for them there. So,
All right. So, what do we want to wager this week?
Well, you still haven't given me the Twitter name.
Yeah,
that
I keep
you
forgetting
won
that
like
too.
I think a month ago now.
Yeah, I'll get there.
Okay.
Again, somebody at me about it in the middle of the week, so remember to do this.
Do you want me to say Ben Remington, stable genius?
My God. I don't know what to wager here.
Well, no, that'll be the following week. We'll be at the Meltdown,
Yeah, that's true.
so that'll be next week's.
For those wondering, we are not going forward with a Winter Meltdown podcast this year.
Yeah.
As much as we enjoy putting those productions on at the crown jewel of the Twins Daily events.
Yes.
We are just going to go and enjoy ourselves this year. No podcast, but we will have something more to that effect the following weekend for you. So look for that.
Yeah.
Basically, it's a similar concept, but we fine-tuned it a little bit.
Right. And, I mean, quite frankly, putting one on at the Meltdown is...
Chaotic.
It is, and it's a lot of work, and it takes away from a lot of the fun of the day for us.
Right.
And while it was a good show, I felt like I really liked the people that we had on and the discussions that we had. We can pull that off, outside of that show fairly easily, especially with the studio here. So we're going to shoot for more of that, giving you better audio quality, giving you people who are a little more focused.
Yeah.
A little more sober.
As much as we, well, our iTunes reviews, some of which seem to like when one of these shows host.
Well, you just got to come into the
little,
studio drunk on Sunday then.
Well, I don't know if I want to do that. We're already on thin ice here in the studio.
That's a good point. We've caused enough trouble around here.
Yeah. So I guess I would say, I don't know what to wager. It's weird. Maybe just, is there a jersey you have in your closet that you least like to wear?
Let's see. Jersey I don't wear anymore. Actually, it probably was. I have a Parisi red jersey that's a knockoff. But I just wore it to the game on Tuesday because he was coming back. So that's not a great example. But a jersey I haven't worn much. I have a Flyers white jersey from the 90s that I don't wear very often at all for obvious reasons. It's blank, so that's probably another reason why. That would be one that I don't wear very often.
I was going to say the loser could wear their least favorite jersey to the Winter Meltdown.
Oh, yeah. That's a solid one.
As I currently wear mine. Just out of shame.
Tipping your cap. Not really, but.
Yeah. Just like the Sunday morning drive of shame.
It really was.
So, yeah, I guess we can put that one down, and I will put that. My least favorite jersey is the Colorado Avalanche jersey I have in the closet. Their third jersey from the early 2000s.
Oh, yeah?
And it has Paul Kariya on the back. So
Yeah.
that's why I own it.
Yep.
But because it has Colorado on the front, that still is why it's my least favorite jersey.
Still embarrassing to be seen in public. Well, I have an Avalanche jersey, too. But I actually like it.
But you
so.
like because it's Patrick Waugh. So
it's not the same, I guess.
So there you go. There's your weekly wager.
All right.
And with that said, we move to our famed segment, the jerseys.
Here to start the third period. What team is this? It's not Team USA. Well, yes, it is. They've got on new uniforms. They're wearing the logo of the Duck. I've never seen this before.
The jersey of the week is the Winnipeg Jets. In their previous version, the Jets, who are now the Coyotes, had a great jersey history.
Mm-hmm.
And the current Jets have yet to go with a third jersey. They are, what are they, in their like sixth season now in Winnipeg? They've yet to issue a second jersey here. Or not a second jersey, a third jersey. Which I find pretty incredible, actually.
Yeah.
That I guess jersey sales are just good and well in Winnipeg, so they don't need the cash grab. But
you know why their sales are, well, no, that doesn't make sense. Never mind.
Maybe they just need more time to bring back the old jerseys. Which actually I lied. They had the outdoor game jersey, which they kind of model as a third jersey last year from their Heritage Classic, which was basically modeled after the 80s Jets jerseys.
Sure.
But they still really haven't gone with anything new in terms of a third jersey. So thinking ahead to what maybe a third jersey would look like if the Jets go that way, I have honestly no idea if the Jets are considering one at this point. But I got to think that it would be centered around the kind of baby blue color that they have as trim on the current home jersey. That would probably be where I'd start, have that as a base, and an
homage to the Atlanta Thrashers.
Oh God. That would be very fitting.
It would.
But yeah, I would just go with that and just find some kind of a model of their current jersey with that, and yeah, I guess that where I would go with it. What about you?
Yeah, same thing. I would probably look to that. I wonder if there's any way they can incorporate any of the old stuff more than they do. You know, like you're talking about with the Heritage jersey. Like, could they make that a third jersey and that's kosher as far as the NHL is concerned? I would think so. And so, I don't know. With that being said, I just don't know how they don't embrace that heritage a little bit more. Like, you don't have to copy that jersey exactly, but I mean, this jersey that they're currently wearing, the set they're currently wearing, pays no homage whatsoever to the previous franchise. Like, none. I mean, the colors are similar, but they don't even have red. They have a little tiny bit of red, but they don't have, they were red and blue or blue and red, and now they're blue and other blue. So I don't know. It's weird to me. I'd like to see them pay homage somehow, some way. Not even as a full blown like this is the standard Timo Solani copied era jersey, but just some kind of homage to the Jets. Whether it be something in a word mark or just the word mark Jets, like it was on the jersey without the circle and the actual jet or whatever. Something to that effect would be great.
Right.
I don't know. I just don't know where they're at as far as that goes. They must not want to. I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, the Wild obviously don't pay homage to the North Stars whatsoever. I mean, they have the star on the logo, but that's from the state more than anything. I think.
I don't know. I think they just seem more focused on, making this brand stick rather than kind of keep going back to the old stuff, which, I get. It's such a good hockey look and whatnot, but I get it. And their crest is actually really good, their main logo. So right. I give them that, and for trying to stick with it and whatnot, not always just go back to the old school stuff.
Right.
But, yeah, I guess.
Well, but then they brought back the whiteout.
Yeah.
And that was very much an old Jets thing.
Yeah, that was a very Jets thing.
And the team very much supported, which was cool. It was great. Like that was
those 2 home games they had where they just
funny.
Got wiped.
Well, we'll get to see it again this year, I guess. But I don't know. Just like don't run from your past. Don't, especially with the past they have. I feel like is pretty good. So
yeah. So well, that's the jerseys for this week, and that can probably wrap it up for us on this show. Thanks again to Dan Myers for calling in. Always good to hear his thoughts, and we'll hopefully have him back again.
Mm-hmm.
You can find our show on the Twitter at GATG Wild Podcast, Facebook, Instagram as well. Find us on iTunes. Give us a fancy iTunes rating if you so choose to do that. Just search Giles and the Goalie. Find us on SoundCloud. We have a YouTube channel where we do game previews, game recaps, and you can find all the podcasts on there. Just search Giles and the Goalie on YouTube, and you can find us there. We do love the subscriptions, so thank you to those who have. Ben and I are on Twitter at Ben Remington, at Giles Farrell. And Ben and I write for a website called Zone Coverage, which is zonecoverage.com. If you're looking for just our hockey works, zonecoverage.com/wild, where you can find everything we do there. And that will do it for us. So thank you to everyone for listening, and we will talk to you next week.
Later.
It's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.